Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews,
Mm-hmm.
brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre.
Mm-hmm.
I will be your host for this episode, Ryan Borochovitz, co-artistic producer here at Cup of Hemlock, and I'm joined by my other co-artistic producer, Mackenzie Horner.
Buongiorno, friends. Buongiorno,
Hello.
buongiorno. Hello.
So happy to be joined by you because today we are going to be talking about the new play. New is the title
Yes.
of this new play. So it is a new work, thus the title, among other reasons. But a new play by Pamela Mala Sinha, and it is directed by Alan Dilworth, produced by Necessary Angel Theatre in association with Canadian Stage and the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. But we are discussing its run in Toronto at the Toronto premiere, which is currently running in Toronto at the Berkeley Street Theatre until May 14th. So get your tickets while you still can.
Yes.
And yeah, so we're excited to dive into this piece. We will have a non-spoiler segment at the beginning, then we will get into more deep spoilers. Before we get into it, Mac, I have to ask, what is in your cup today?
Well, today I have some kiwi, banana, orange, crystal light. I've already been drinking quite a bit of it because I was very thirsty when I got home from seeing the play. We literally just got home and ran right to our computer so we can do this discussion. One of the three coming up that we have, that'll be Ryan and I.
Yeah, this is a busy week, so we'll just keep this review clipping along. For myself, I have in my Cup of Hemlock cup, I'm just drinking water because I've had enough coffee today already.
Fair enough. It is almost getting to dinner time, so you gotta start winding down the caffeine for the day.
Exactly. So, new.
Yes.
Do you want to, maybe, usually when you're hosting, you flip this part over to me, but would you like to get the ball rolling by concisely, non-spoilery describing what this play is about?
Ryan, I'd be happy to do that, and thankfully in the program, they gave us a synopsis. I will do a dictation.
Okay.
Or a recipe, whatever you want to call it.
So creative. Love it.
So, the year is 1970. The place, Winnipeg, Manitoba. The world is rapidly changing, just like the life of Kasim, a medical doctor who reluctantly agrees to an arranged marriage unbeknownst to his girlfriend, Abby. When he ties the knot over the phone, he must face the reality of welcoming his young bride, Nusa, to Canada. Meanwhile, his friends Sachin and Sita struggle to find stability in their marriage following a tragic loss, while Aisha and Ash's modern liberative views are challenged by the pressures back home. Nusa's arrival in this community sets off a spark that will ignite questions for each of them. Will they dare answer? If they do, what then?
Wow. What a dictation. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's kind of the play in the nutshell. We sort of follow the lives of these three South Asian couples who are all living in this. It's an apartment building that I believe they referred to as the International Center in, we can assume, Winnipeg, or maybe just a town right out of Winnipeg.
About half an hour away from the airport. Half an hour away.
Yes, but that doesn't necessarily tell us precisely whether or not they are in the city proper, but either way, we are in somewhat metropolitan Manitoba. And we are following the lives of these three couples who have all at one time or another immigrated from the region of South Asia. I don't think they specified if they're all specifically from India, so I will not state that here. And of course, this is in the 70s, and we're dealing with the partition between India and Pakistan as an important historical touchstone that has affected the lives of these characters. So the geography does get a little historically fuzzy and muddy in relation to that.
Yes.
The fact that most of the plot has been set forward by the arrival of Nusa, whose name kind of sounds like the title of this play.
She is?
And yes, and it's all about how these characters' lives in this interesting little community that they form with each other ripple out as a result. That's right. So that's the play in a nutshell. Would you like to share your general thoughts and impressions? Still non-spoiler.
Absolutely, yes. We're in the non-spoiler zone. We haven't decided on what our spoiler show will be yet.
I was thinking about this earlier. We should have discussed it. Maybe like a lamp, because there's the moment where a lamp is moved to elsewhere in the room. Are we cool? I agree. Let's do a lamp. But not yet. No spoiler lamp.
No spoiler lamp yet. It's coming though. But general thoughts. I knew nothing about this play. When we got the invite, it just sounded like a very interesting summary of a show. I think they sent exactly the same summary as what I just read.
That makes sense.
So, it's a great kind of hook summary of what's going to happen. This was the second time I've now been back to Can Stage after we did Ronnie Burkett at Christmas. So, I love the space. I love the old brick.
Yeah.
The set design was fantastic. I love the 3-room set, that very livable set. It was wonderful. The cast was great. You really did feel the community within the show. All the core Six and Abby are all very well cohesive together. You feel the tensions and the pulls within the group as well. I also loved how the space gave time for silence. That was something I really picked up on. There's a scene where Kasim and Anusa are doing dinner together after he's gotten home from work. And just the prolonged, awkward silences that were built into that scene was terrific. Because not many plays give time for that type of awkward silence to be had. But it's so essential because you feel the pull of this marriage and the distance between them and how just awkward life is feeling in this. I really did create that vibe. And I like the fact that all of these characters were great characters. They were not, virtuous people. They had lives. They were human. They make mistakes. They say the wrong thing at the wrong time. They're human beings who are evolving and changing as this rapidly changing world around them in the 70s was changing and evolving too. I mean, we're 2 years away from Nixon's resignation and Watergate, 2 or 4 years away from Nixon's resignation.
Did they ever specify, is it the year 1970? Or
they say 1970 here.
Okay, I just thought it was vaguely the 70s, so I wasn't clocking specific historical points.
And then they say in the play it's New Year's 1971.
Oh, I see.
Second act. So we're still not in, or still at the tail end of the Vietnam War, and Nixon and Watergate are still bubbling. The
but also
ERA.
it's in Canada.
It's also in Canada, but once again, they keep just that time period. I mean, in Canada, to be honest, the 70s were their own thing in Canada, but we didn't quite have the landmark historical events like the U.S. had at that point. So, but either way, but we also have just gone through a partition. Happened. I think it's the 50s or the 40s or 50s is when that happened. India, so that gets a lot of talk too. Once again, this is all about the turning of the times, the changing, and the evolution. In the 70s, the beginning of the 70s really is a kickoff point for that whole era of time when in the 70s you had Watergate, you had the protests, you had the ERA movement go through, all that stuff going on. So this definitely is the precipice of that. You can feel that in the play of this is a changing time for everybody in the world. So overall, though, I thought it was a very well done play. The ending was a bit abrupt, but we'll dive more into that once we get past the spoiler shield. But I definitely did enjoy the grayness of the characters, the set, and the fact that the director gave time for just life to be lived on stage. It wasn't clipping along in such a fast way that they don't actually live in these places. I thought that was a very good job of making each setting feel lived in, and you feel the couple's connections with one another, as well as in this larger group. So yeah, those are my general thoughts. Ryan?
Yeah, no, I would agree with most of what you said. I will admit, we did just come out of it, and I do think there's a lot of things that I need to maybe sit with that I'll think about as the week goes on.
Yes.
But I kind of have somewhat mixed feelings about this piece.
Okay.
And in the spirit of the theater enthusiasm that we like this show to be about, this isn't about heavy critique or, lambasting a show. This is just about working through our thoughts and thinking about what we've seen, what we liked, some things that we maybe have questions about. And, before we get too much into spoiler zone, I agree with you that this had a very specific, feeling of place. I wasn't even sure what year we were in specifically. I missed the parts where they alluded as specifically, but it was very clearly the 70s, from every little piece of set dressing to the costumes.
Yeah.
Just chef kiss. That was also expertly done. The performances were all very strong. In this, as what you mentioned with the set, these 3 rooms that were all 3 of our main couples' apartments because they live in the same building, and it gave this very practical sense of uniformity in the spaces they live in, but also it didn't really matter if a prop was still there from an earlier scene.
There's incorporated into the next scene, which was great.
It was all very expertly done, and I loved the way that we had this open space. It kind of it seems like, wow, this is a pretty big living space for immigrants coming to this country, living in this international center. I imagine they probably historically would have lived in a much smaller space than this large sprawling set we have, but it was a beautiful set. I liked the periphery spaces where we could always see somebody walking around the back, or if the scene was set at a bus stop or an airport, it was closer to the downstage area and outside of the apartment. Spatially, it was all really well done. The projections on the exposed brick was a very perfect way of establishing, because we have quite a few characters in this, and it takes a while to get to know them all. So the fact that we begin quite smartly, I think, with 3 scenes, one introducing us to each of our couples, and have a big projection that says whose apartment we're in allows us to orient ourselves. Okay, so you're you, and then we can, move along and continue spending time with these people. So I think there was a lot of really great stuff. Did I mention the cast? The cast is great. We'll talk more about them individually.
Yeah.
Why I would say, after all that praise, why I'd say I may be a little more lukewarm on it is it's definitely a slow burn of a play, and that's not a problem per se. And like you said, there's great moments where they do let it breathe. But I part of me feels like maybe this story feels more like a novel than a play. And I wonder if it would have worked better as a novel than a play, because it has the feel of a novel where we're just spending a lot of time with these characters, getting to know them, getting the ins and outs of their lives. But it never really seems to, or very seldom seems to, arrive at like dramatic flashpoints or big questions of what's going to happen next, what's going on in their lives. It just feels like, these are people we get to know, we get to simmer with them, see what's happening. And that, to me, if you had told me that this was based on a novel and adapted to the stage, I would have said that makes perfect sense. But it's, as far as I know, it's not. It was written for the stage, and it really does have that novel-esque feel to it. And I don't know how I feel about that. I think it kind of, there's valid arguments for adapting novels to the stage, so there's nothing saying that a play can't have the feel of a novel, but I think we tend to adapt novels to the stage when they really seem like they have that beating dramatic heart that, like, oh, this would be great on the stage, and this is a play that I feel like would be great as a novel. So I
would
don't
say a
know.
mini-series. I could see this as a very good mini-series.
Sure. Yeah, because
I definitely think there's more you can expand at and make into like a 6-8 episode mini-series about these people's lives.
Yeah, and the mini-series form kind of has been the ideal way of adapting novels, because it does kind of give the time to breathe. This play, I'm not even saying it's because this play is too long. I wasn't bored for a second. I was captivated by everything that was going on, and it was, never looking down at my watch.
I was ready for more, to be honest.
Well, and that's the thing. And that's what a good novel does. You spend a lot of time getting to know these characters that you get sad when you get to that last page and they're just not there anymore. But plays are usually more, not necessarily plot driven, but kind of center around big events, dramatic flashpoints in their lives that do feel like something that we could really grapple onto. And I think I have a very, interesting relationship to Pamela's work as a playwright, because I think, around, I want to say it was like 2013, I saw, I don't know if it's her first play, but one of her first major plays, Crash, at Theatre Passe Muraille, and it's a solo show that she did, and also directed by Alan Dilworth. I believe the two of them collaborated on all of the things I'm going to mention here, but and they have a good working synergy together. But Crash was incredible. That was like a formative theatrical experience for me. It's a masterclass in solo performance. I was, on the edge of my seat the whole time, and was just, incredible piece. Like, hats off to her and it's gotten plenty of accolades. She doesn't need me to tell her how great that show is, but and then a couple years later at Soul Pepper, she did this play called Happy Place, also directed by Alan Dilworth. And I remember, I'm going to paraphrase here because it's a number of years ago now, but I remember the program note from that being something to the effect of, when I was writing Crash, I had all of these other characters in it, and a dramaturg told me to get rid of them. It's not their story. Put them in a different play if you want to. So she wrote the play for all of those other characters, so Crash could just be the solo play that it was. And I was a lot less enthused with Happy Place. I know a lot of people did like it, and I think there was a lot of stuff there. It was, I know we're not reviewing her entire career here, we're just reviewing this play, but I'm walking through this to sort of, I think, get back to the point of why I think I'm struggling with this one a little bit, because Happy Place was what it did. It was set in a women's rehabilitation facility for mental health issues, and I believe all the characters in it had struggled with suicidal tendencies or attempts prior to their arrival at the facility. And you're kind of watching it the whole time, and it's similar to this. You get to know all these characters, their inner lives, their struggles, and you kind of get the sense that, okay, if this is a play, I know where this might be going. One of them's probably going to kill themselves by the end of this.
Yes.
Just because what else is going to happen? That's sort of the feel that you get watching it. And then that didn't happen. Spoiler alert for this play that's not currently playing in Toronto and it was like from 2015 or whatever. But yeah, it was, I thought there was like this admirable, resistance towards cliche to not do the obvious thing. But then I was left with this feeling of, but in the absence of that, what is there? It was kind of just, you're spending your lives with these people, and then one of them inevitably doesn't kill themselves, and then, okay, so where was this going? It kind of didn't really, for me, feel like it was going anywhere. And I was similar mixed feelings with that, because I'm like, it's good that it didn't do the obvious cliche thing, but it kind of has to do something. So that was... it's Crash was such an incredible experience for me that I was had very high expectations for that. So now coming into this with both of those previous experiences in mind, I'm like, okay, let's see where we're going with this. And to me, this play did feel a lot more like my experience of Happy Place than it did of Crash. And, she's obviously experimenting as an artist. She's trying a lot of different things, but I think, if I have somewhat of a more ambivalent reaction, it is because I would have maybe, You
were spoiled by Crash.
Crash is great, and obviously that's a deeply, for anyone who knows what it's about, it's a deeply traumatic story for her that I wouldn't necessarily want her to return to form and plumb those depths, that she has other stories to tell and other personal stories, as we'll talk about probably after the spoiler shield. But yes, I did kind of, it's hard to even say. I think I've probably said enough and we can move on, but... I would encourage people to check this out, because I do think it is a strong work, but it's also one that might leave you, similar to me, wondering what was the payoff to this journey. And if it doesn't have one, then what is it offering in place of one?
Right. Good questions. That will lead us into our non-spoiler area, I'd say, Ryan.
Okay, well, our spoiler area.
True.
Lead us out of the non-spoiler era.
Yes.
So there was a scene in the play where a lamp was moved from one part of the room to the other. And so we will now turn on our spoiler lamp and move it to the side of the screen, or the center of the screen. Everything after this point, if you wanted to see the show, I'll just reiterate now, it's playing at the Berkeley Street Theatre here in Toronto until May 14th. It's new. It is a new play, Necessary Angel Theatre in association with Canadian Stage and Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. Check it out. If you don't want to hear spoilers, leave the video or podcast episode now and come back after you've seen it.
Well said, Ryan. Well said.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's get into spoilers. Where do you want to start, Ryan? Do we want to go?
I would say
couple, or like
I know we talked we'd want to do couple by couple, but is there anything before we get into that, just general appraisals that you felt like things I would have said earlier but didn't want to get into because of possible spoilers? Now would be a good time to just lead us in with that.
I mean, direction-wise, I thought, once again, this play had very good flow. I enjoyed the transitions. The one thing that did catch me was there was no running water in the kitchen.
Oh, shucks.
I know. Oh, shucks. Everything else was very well done there. But I understand, you can't have running water in every production. We're not National Theatre. But yeah, overall, once again, like, it's just, I think you described it well. This is a very slow burn play that can at times make you wonder, what are we building to? And is this a conclusive ending, or is there a sequel play coming that we don't know about? Newer. Who knows? I love the historical discussions that they had about the partition. Not partition. Is it partition?
Yeah, the partition.
The partition, thank you. Because I feel like that's not a big historical moment that we discuss a lot in the world. I mean, Marvel just did it with Ms. Marvel. They did a whole episode on it, for people who have watched the wonderful Ben Kingsley's Gandhi, they get into it. But it's definitely not something that's actively talked about in history, but it's still being very much dealt with today. It's still a major geographical, cultural issue in the world.
It probably has a lot more impact in, South Asian diaspora communities, more so than just,
True, but even like, people don't realize that it was Lord Mountbatten, Lord Mountbatten, who was on the crown, who gets blown up by the IRA.
Yes,
he was
Tywin Lannister.
Yes, Tywin Lannister, yes. But he was like a major player in that, but the crown kind of blows over that entirely. It's one of those things where as a history buff myself, I enjoyed that audience, because we had a very diverse audience with us today here. And one of those things, and so the fact that I don't know if everybody knows about what the partition is, and maybe that will inspire them to go home and watch a documentary, read about it, because it is a very major geopolitical, geographic thing that it's still affecting a lot of things in the world today. It's one of those big moments. So I did enjoy that of the plays, that they brought that very much in. I mean, the whole discussion that Nusa and Kasim have, or no, it's Abby Abby and Kasim have about why he does what he does.
And then
he says it's about
he has
his mother.
kind of the same conversation again with Nusa. And the thing that I do like about that is it was handled very well, in my opinion. Again, this is a very well-written play. Nothing I said before changes that. But yes, I loved the mother going on a hunger strike, and that's what coerces her son to agree to this arranged marriage. Yeah. And it's funny because there's talk about, the history, India, the partition. They don't mention Gandhi at first. And you kind of understand that, like, okay, this is just an interesting historical echo to that. And then we later find out that his mother marched with Gandhi and, faced consequences.
She was in prison.
She was in prison. And two things I love about this. One, it adds a whole new context to her choice to, coerce her son through it. But she recognizes that this is an effective political strategy to get what you want. And the second thing that I really love about this is that they didn't write in a spoon-feedy line about, so that's why, like, the thing we're talking about now, about this connection. I was waiting for them to do it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to cringe if they do it. And they didn't. And I love it. And they just leave you to draw that connection for yourself. And that, I think, is just very effective writing to trust the audience. And maybe not everybody will recognize that connection or knows enough about the history to discern that connection. But I think it was well done that they didn't feel the need to explain it, that it's just there for those who will recognize it. So, yeah, I think...
I mean, generally speaking, once again, I enjoyed it. The set was fun. Once again, the 70s were very clearly put on display here. And also just the costume design in this. Like, just the fact that we have so many beautiful Indian outfits that are, like, once again, it just put on full display the beauty of this culture that with these beautiful garments that they wear and things like that. And these beautiful costume pieces are just stunning. Like Anusa's green outfit that she shows up wearing for the
Puja, the Brothers' Day, they called it that.
Yeah, Brothers' Day ceremony. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, that costume is stunning. That beautiful green costume is just, wow. It takes your breath away. I mean, they really do live up to the line when they say she overdressed. And she comes in and it's like,
you're dressed too nicely to sit on the floor. Please take the couch.
Yes, exactly. But it's like stunning. Like, once again, our costume designer, who is Michelle Bon.
Yeah, Bon, I assume.
She was wonderful. I mean, she did a great job capturing this culture and this time period. And once again, displaying how everybody in this play are at different spots in their evolution and the way they dress. It was very well done. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I noticed in the program we actually have little sketches of some of the costumes in here, so you could take a piece of it home with you. I also, like, on the subject of costuming, I noticed it's subtle, and I would need to maybe watch the show again with this in mind to kind of chart it completely, but the ways that the color palettes of the characters changed as time goes on, and they change as people, and a lot more greens become reds, and I wonder, what we're supposed to infer from all of that, but I think there's very clearly a deliberateness to who's wearing what when. So, yeah, I thought that was very well handled. Hats off to the costumes. Okay, I know you wanted to, let's dive into the characters, and that will help us also talk about the actors as well. So why don't we, as we said, maybe we'll go through it one couple at a time, and that'll be the best way to segment out this cast. So we'll probably, even though Kasim and Nusa are sort of main couple that a lot of this circulates around, I know you want to talk about the ending, so to save the ending for the end, we'll save them for the end. That. So why don't we start with Sachin and Sita? They're as a good entry point couple.
Yes. They have the most baggage right off the top of the show. You automatically pick up on something's up with these two. There's something already off. They're not vibing together at all. And, I think, Sita is the character who's most based on the playwright's mother.
Yeah, and the playwright herself played her.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, right there, Pamela Mala Sinha is playing Sita. And I think she did a wonderful job. I mean, a mother in grief is basically what she's playing throughout this show. And, you know, her beautiful speech where she talks about the fact that they cremated their daughter, which is not part of the custom. And then they put the ashes in the river. And she describes that the river is a place where things are thrown that aren't meant to be thought of again. Banana leaves, flowers, things like that just sit at the bottom of the river, you know? And the fact that she goes, my daughter's in there. I have no place to go visit my child. I mean, I thought that was a beautiful job. And at the same time, her husband, who was
Fuad Ahmed.
Yes, Fuad Ahmed. Yeah, who was lovely. And I mean, once again, you can understand his struggle in this piece. Like neither one of them were, villainous is not the right word, but neither one of them are intentionally doing what they do to each other. Unfortunately, a lot of times when couples get into the situation of a very hard grief, it could be like, unfortunately, that can drive a wedge between the couple because they turn on each other when they have nowhere else to turn for their frustrations of the world. And, you know, what happens with Sachin and Nusa, you know,
we're past the spoiler field. You can say it. You can name it.
Yes, they have an affair with each other.
Oh my!
And I mean, this scene here where like they meet at the airport and she mistakes him for Kasim. I was like, I know. I was about to say. I was like, oh, I see where we're going with these two. These two automatically got sparks going here,
which was funny because I thought that moment at the time it felt like a waste of perfectly good dramatic irony because it didn't go anywhere that she mistook him for because he was there. But then when we got to the part where things escalate between them, I was like, okay, that
and
there was a
meeting too, which is a very modern approach to things. I mean, Aisha gives her the liberated women and things like that. So it's like it makes sense that she's evolving this way. There she goes, it's okay, like that she full on leads him to it. And it's like understandable. Like he is someone who is so desperate for connection again. And his wife has said, everything we do together hurts me in some way. It's like, how do you find connection again when your partner is actively saying any type of connection we have ends up with me being hurt? You know, so I think these two as a couple were really the emotional anchor point of the story because everything spins out from there, you know, like Nusa and Sachin fall for each other because Sita is grieving. And then, you know, Sita calls out Kasim the one night where they come across each other and she kind of drives him back into Nusa's arms a bit too late. You know, so it's one of those things that they really do have this kind of trickle effect on everybody else around them, which is really nice way to start with them because they're the couple that has the most baggage. You know, it's very well done. I thoroughly felt for this couple because I've known couples who've had the stillborn children, miscarriages. You know, it is far more common than what we talk about in the world. And I think it is a topic that does need to have more conversation put around it because there are so many people in the world who grieve and who pain through this experience without, you know, having proper communication to them going, it's okay. You know, I think Asita just had somebody to properly talk to about this and it wasn't such a shameful thing that this happened to them, you know? Maybe things could have worked out better, but it's one of those things that we're in the 70s. We're in the turning point of the era. Like we're at this time in history, and still today, even it's still not an openly talked about conversation, you know? So it's one of those things of you feel the pain of this couple, and I really did enjoy it. I did find their strained chemistry very good, and you did feel the pain of the two of them together and why they do what they do, you know? So yeah. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered a lot of ground here. It's good. Yeah, it's funny. Sachin was my favorite character until he very suddenly wasn't.
He does a very quick 180.
Yeah, which I felt maybe happened a little too suddenly. I get that maybe seeds were planted earlier, but I love Sachin. He in the whole first half of the play, he was holding it down. He's going through a lot. He never snapped at anyone. He was frustrated, but he held it together. He understood like his responsibility, not just in his marriage, but in his friend group and how he's the one who kind of, has been through a lot, as we learn about later with his upbringing and family. But yeah, he's just like this likable, reliable guy who takes a turn, and to me, I felt like that turn happens very suddenly. It's not,
Yeah.
this is not, anything to do with, I would even say, Fuad's acting himself. He did an excellent job at endearing me to this character that I was able to feel so betrayed by him by this point. But yes, I find his choices questionable, not unearned or dramatically speaking, but just, yeah, it is challenging. And I know there's a lot of grief going on here in this relationship. Like, this entire play and all three couples is just dominated by the fact that nobody's getting laid. Like, that is, if you have to sum up this play in a single sentence, it's three married couples for one reason or another. None of them are having sex with each other, and things come to a boil as a result of that. And yeah, it is interesting and frustrating that they do make these choices that you can see so clearly from the outside why this is so the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
I understand from Noosa's perspective, she's liberating herself and, it works out well for her in the end. But from Sachin's perspective, I'm just like, this is such a bad idea. What are you doing?
Don't do it, buddy. Don't do it.
Why are you unbuttoning your shirt more and drinking more? And it's just like, it's when a character takes a dark turn in a story, you're like, oh, man.
Here we go.
And as for Pamela Sita, like, she was excellent in this. In all three of the plays that she's written now that I've seen of hers, she has been on stage herself. Of course, Crash being a solo show is all her. And she played one of the women in Happy Place as well. And yeah, she's a reliably talented performer who's very good at bringing her own characters to life. This character, as the program notes do indicate, is very heavily based on her mother. Who has a similar life of being a dancer in India and, coming to Canada and with her husband and, being very fish out of water in that regard. Yeah. And yeah, she does it so well. The thing that I think is interesting, and we'll talk more about Kasim in a second, but I found the relationship between Sita and Kasim was perhaps underdeveloped. Because it's the two of them that are having this Brothers' Day type ritual together, and they have almost no scenes of just the two of them, and I felt like it didn't really convey the history that these characters supposedly have together. Why, out of this whole friend group of 6 people, it's the two of them that have the special bond that needed to be sanctified in this way. I imagine there probably is a cultural dimension to this that maybe I will recognize beyond my understanding just from a positionality point of view, and I'm not trying to belittle any of that, and maybe some South Asian viewers of the play felt like it made perfect sense, more connecting to them of why these two have this special bond, but just dramaturgically, I didn't feel like we got to see enough of them together to justify what they meant in each other's lives. And, Kasim was going through a lot of his own problems. All the characters are going through their own problems that maybe drove wedges between them, but I don't know if something like a flashback sequence could have given more texture to this, or at least maybe a recollection story monologue of some history they have together. But it was a bit of a question mark for me that why these two are the ones for whom this is such a special ritual that's going on. But overall, starting with couple number 1, excellent performances and interesting dimensions on the story. As we'll probably come back to both of them again as they get intertwined in the other characters' lives as well. So I guess we'll move on to Ash and Ashi.
This is the most interesting one that I really felt was underdeveloped. Yes, Aisha, who I felt was very underdeveloped, in my opinion. Because, their conclusion scene felt very rushed, because, Ash comes out in that scene. I turned to you at intermission because they kept doing these things where I'm going swimming. And I turned to you and went, okay.
It was very adorable that you thought you were figuring out something that was being hidden when it was, I felt very obvious that, he's gay. The play is not condemning him for it, but it is just something that is difficult to live with in a South Asian marriage in the 70s, even if your wife is a hardcore feminist.
Yes. So, once again, I feel like because we had, 3 couples and we were trying to track all 3 stories, their story got kind of, I don't want to say shafted, but kind of got the fastest wrap up, where I was like, this is what I will say. I think all 3 of these couples could have held their own play.
Yes,
on
agreed.
Their own.
That was the dramaturgical note that she received for Crash when the first draft had all these other characters in it that put these other characters in their own separate play.
Yes. And I feel with this one, they could have done a bit more like maybe lose one couple or do something to slim the cast a bit to give more time to these stories, because trying to balance these three separate plot lines kind of left, unfortunately, because it's already over 2 hours of a play. This is a big play. But it just felt like, once again, I felt like there should be a third act of this play to really give these characters a proper wrap up to these big fallouts that they're having at the end of the second act. You know, just to get that proper conclusionary bit of the story, because I did feel it was very kind of, I mean, I did like their dynamic. I felt these two as a couple were very well put together in like the sense of you felt the synergy between them. I mean, they're the ones that say they grew up as childhood friends, and you felt that with this couple. They're a very modern couple. You know, we get a random scene where where Aisha's protesting.
Yeah.
You know,
at a Miss Canada pageant or whatever
it
was.
Yes, and, you know, it's one of those fun things there where like it's just you get them as this very progressive couple, but then this big revelation between the two of them happens where he says, "I'm gay," and she and then it's like, well, we'll find a new way to be a very progressive couple, but then nothing else comes at the end after that.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa! This is a major turning point in this character's story, and this is where you're leaving them. You know, we need at least one more scene with them to really give them the proper wrap up that they deserve as a couple. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know, Ryan, what do you think?
I had a similar impression of them, but I think I came to different conclusions than you, because for me, the problem wasn't that, they, you know, were unceremoniously, you know, cut short and we don't get to see more of where their relationship goes, or that they belonged in their own separate play, because I do see thematically how they do fit within the broader texture of what this play is doing. But I guess for me, I would have liked to see them be more embroiled in the lives of the other two couples, other than just being friends who live in their building, who come from the same region of the world as them and spend social gatherings with them.
Right.
Because their plot very much felt separate. And it's understandable that, you know, through Fuad and Nuza's relationship, that those other two couples became intertwined in a way that these ones didn't. These characters and their relationship and conflicts never really found a way to be actively involved in what was going on. Anytime there was a large group scene, they're like, we're here too. But it didn't seem like that they were, you know. And like, I like them a lot as characters. I found their story very compelling. I do kind of, that said, I kind of like where we left them off. I do think that it was just, and the coming out scene in particular, because it understood that we, the audience, figured it out long before it needed to be said. So it didn't turn it into, I've got like a big thing to tell you, everyone. Right. That it's, you know, there was a lot of clues dropped to the point that when, you know, when you're like, told ya, I'm like, yes, everybody in this room knew it. So, yeah, but I like the way that he understands that she already knew it too. It's the first time he said it aloud, but like, this isn't news to her, as per the title of the play. That I think there was something, you know, nice about the fact that, yes, on our wedding day, my old boyhood friend came and we spent the whole time with them, and he looks jealous in all of our pictures. I wonder what that's about, and I need to look at the postcard from him and smoke a joint before I try to impregnate you, because that's the only way I could get the motor running. And I'm spending a lot of time at the swimming club with my friend who I met there. Like, you know, yes, we get it. So, but I do think, this, you know, for all of her, you know, feminist ideology, she still is kind of like grappling with, well, what does it mean to be in this marriage where my worth is still measured by my ability to have children? And, you know, what does it mean to still love this person who, you know, does not desire me? And he loves me, they love each other. And I think that's what makes their story, you know, quite compelling and maybe even a little tragic. But it's, I think there's a lot of great stuff here. I don't know if it could sustain a whole play in its own right. I just would have liked to see it more intertwined with the other plot lines of this play to really justify its presence here, because I don't think it should have been cut. I do like what it adds. I do too. It's just, unfortunately, you said you dramaturgically pinpointed. They were so separate from the other two couples who are so intertwined that it often felt like the add-on story. That's the couple that really should have gotten their own play. Dealing with this type of situation, because it is a big situation of, you got the family back home expecting after 7 years that there was a child,
a offspring from this partnership, but then it's not happening. And it's like, well, why is that? It's like they could have their own play and just really built into this thing of, like make it, make the coming out an early part of that play, and then have the rest of the play, the rest of the 2/3 be all about, how do they deal with this? How do they evolve and work through this type of thing,
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Anyway, the last couple is Cassim and Nuza, but we should give an honorable mention shout out to Alicia Johnston as Abby and the MC at that beauty pageant we just spoke about.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that she doesn't get left out of the conversation because she doesn't spend most of the play coupled. What did you think of her performance and characters?
She was very compelling as a character. I mean, she comes on to the scene right away, and you already felt Cassim had a chemistry with her. They had a very wonderful partnership together. And then, the reveal happens, and you really like Cassim for it, and you understand Abby's frustration with this. And you really just do feel bad that, oh my goodness, I wish these two could have worked it out and figured it out, because they were really the couple that should have been. Because they did have a really good chemistry together. And I mean, she also doubles as the MC for a brief
one
minute.
Scene.
Yeah, but it's one of those things there where I think Alicia did a really good job playing the other woman here and making her a 3-dimensional character, not just a 2-dimensional, the stick in the mud, she's a very progressive character. Once again, she's a woman changing in the era of, she doesn't want to be a nurse. She wants to be a doctor. That type of thing there. So it's like she's a very progressive character that fits in this theme. Once again, it's like, it would be much more interesting for example, once again, playing dramaturgical games here, but it's one of those things of, if you took out Ash and Aisha as characters and just made Abby somehow form a friendship with Nuza, and then have her be the one to introduce her to the new, the feminist movement stuff, would have still ended up in the same thing, It's one of those things of, if you take out the couple and just kept Abby, you could have done something else there. I don't know. But even then, that beautiful scene with her and Sita in the kitchen, where just the hand dancing, it's just, once again, it was a really beautiful chemistry there between the two. And it's like, I wanted more of Abby, but it's like, you don't have enough time for this. And when she's on the breakup, it's like, of course she's not going to be invited to all the dinners again, so. But I thoroughly enjoyed Alicia's performance here. I thought that was a very well done performance.
Yeah, I think Abby's an interesting presence in this play. And I don't know entirely what to make of her presence, because I obviously understand what role she plays in the story, that this is the relationship that Cassim was deeply invested in, that had to end for him to not see his mother die of starvation in her protest. Yeah. And part of me is intrigued because she does disappear for long segments of this play at a time. This very clearly isn't her story. She is a part of this story, but it's not really about her. And every time there was an effort to make it about her, I kind of wondered that, what is this adding? And it gave, this wonderful performer a very, good chance to shine and, flex her skill and talent in this piece. But I also wonder, she is the only white presence, remember, in this story. And part of me wonders, I know that it would have maybe made things very different and you could have written it differently, but what if she wasn't white? What if she was also from the South Asian diaspora, and it's not really a matter of, I can't marry you because you're white, as she keeps insisting, but it's just that my mother has already made the arrangement for me to marry this person, so now I have to marry this person. I'm sorry, this relationship can't... It reminds me a lot of, the play Harlem Duet by Janet Sears, and how the almost entirely white body of critics at the time were confused that, why does Desdemona only appear as an arm that comes off stage? Why are there no white people in this play, is basically the critique that they're asking here. And part of me wonders, does this play need that presence? What is the, what does her whiteness add to this story that is very much about just this community in its own right? And part of me thinking about that does wonder that, is there actually more room for whiteness, or at least kind of the hegemonic majority of of Canada's very pluralistic but still predominantly white culture? what does the confrontation with that
Mhm.
contribute to this story? Because the idea of new, as represented by the title, is, if you read the program notes, Pamela talks about this too. It's the idea of that, you will always be seen as somebody who's new to the country, even if you've been living here for years
Mhm.
or even born here. And the play, while it is kind of about that on the macro level, never really seems to dramatize
Mhm.
that tension.
Right.
That, at least, not insofar as it is a confrontation between the people who see you as new
Right.
and yourself not feeling new.
Mhm.
And so to have our one white character in here just be like, I would have loved to be integrated into your community, but you
Right.
all kept me out. Your old world traditional ways kept me
Yes.
out by you obliging to your mother's demands. I'm like,
Yeah.
is this really the conflict that happens between these, pieces of the Canadian mosaic?
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm curious. It just,
Once again, you could have made a whole other play.
well, yeah,
You could have spun off and done something else entirely.
I like Alicia a lot. I think her performance is very good. Her playing the MC was a funny turn of like, yep, here's
Yes.
another, a sexist man character hosting a beauty pageant is very funny. But yeah, I do wonder, just once you do introduce this element, especially if it's an element that isn't going to be sustained throughout the performance, that's just going to lurk in the shadows, what does it do dramaturgically to the whole? And again, this is a piece I'm going to be thinking about for probably several weeks as I continue to untangle these things. We just saw it this afternoon and we're recording it, our review now, so we can move on. I don't know, these are the things that I came out of the show thinking about.
I feel you. Once again. This play gives me so much. I'm like, Pamela, pitch this as a mini series to CBC.
Yeah.
They will snap this.
Well, I hope they do, because I think, giving a lot of these things more room to breathe, having a whole episode devoted to what's going on with this one couple versus another, and also finding ways to intertwine them. I think there's a lot of potential.
Save Nusa to arrive in at the end of episode 2 or something, so you get the first 2 episodes just with this world and Abby being part of it, so you really do get the feeling of them being really shocked that Team gets married over the phone without telling them. Like as Sachin says, I didn't know he was married until I drove him to the airport. So it's one of those great kind of bits there.
Which I guess brings us, speaking of marriage, to our final couple.
Marriage.
Marriage
is what brings us together.
Over the phone, across oceans. But Kasim and Nusa, played by 2 people who you've likely seen at Crow's Theatre recently, if you attend there frequently. Ali Kazmi, who plays Kasim, he, has had an amazing year of theater. He was in Uncle Vanya, he was in Bengal Tiger, and just at Tarragon, he was in Over the Moon. So he's, and now he's in this. He's doing well for himself. And Mirabelle Sundar Singh, who plays Nusa, the almost titular character. She was part of the amazing cast of 15 Dogs, if anybody saw that at Crow's Theatre, which was a fantastic, one of the, in my opinion, standout shows of the year so far. So great job to her in that, and also in this. So let's talk about this final couple. I know you had thoughts about the ending. Is this what's going to lead us to that? Or if you want to start with them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, first of all, I just want to say once again, I alluded to this in non-spoiler area, but the fact the director gave these 2 so much time to feel the awkwardness in the pull of this arranged marriage is really great. Cass was a very frustrating character where you and I talked about it, where it's like, are we supposed to like this guy? Or are we like on the other side of it?
So you asked me that at the intermission, and
you said you had to wait till the end.
Well, I didn't know. I was just predicting, but I had a feeling that... Okay, you say your thoughts before I get into mine.
Okay. I mean, I will say, do I like him? Not particularly. I think waiting 3 months to tell your current girlfriend that you'd be forcibly married is not a great move, nor do I think alienating this new bride to the point of her going and messing up somebody else's marriage because she's so desperate just for a basic human touch.
And to be clear, their marriage was already messed up before she became involved in it.
Correct, yes. But once again, her not having the proper affection, the proper connection with her husband does open the door for her to seek connection elsewhere. And, Sachin does accept that connection, but it all ties back to Kasim just not, being a good partner. And I think the one decent thing he does in this play is he grants the divorce in a way that she still gets, that he will pay for her schooling.
He strategizes the divorce in a way that will benefit her because it's the least he can do.
Exactly. Which I'm like, okay, that redeems you somewhat. I still don't like all the things you did, but, redeems you in some of the way. I will say they are, once again, like, they are the titular couple. They are the ones that their events spark the whole story. Once again, they are both of them on their own are very fascinating performers who did a lot of really good work here, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I also loved the way that the beginning of the play said if they're speaking in an accent, it means they are not speaking. Or sorry, that they're speaking English. If they're not speaking with an accent, that means they're speaking on Bengali.
Right. Bengali, yeah.
Yeah. So that right there.
Yeah. Can we just take a moment to talk about that convention for a second?
Sure.
Because I have thoughts about it.
Sure.
First thought I'll say is it was very well handled throughout the directing, acting, performing, of like, even when, because there's a shocking amount of moments in this play where people read text aloud, whether it's from books or bus schedules.
Yes.
And whenever they're reading that, even for like the subtlest short moment, they switch back into the accent because, they're reading something in English. Yeah. And it was very well handled the way that we, flip back and forth between accented and non-accented speech. The concern I have about it, I won't necessarily say it's a problem, but the thing that makes me scratch my head is, what does non-accented even mean? Because it's operating under the assumption that when there is a Indian accent, that is an accent, but when they speak with their proper Canadian voices, that is unaccented. And I get it, but I also wonder, is that the most helpful framework for communicating these things? I don't know. Did you have thoughts about that?
I did not go as deep as you did. I just accepted it as kind of like a Judgment at Nuremberg thing, where like if you watch that movie, they kind of zoom in on the earpiece, because at the beginning they're talking in German, and then once you go into the earpiece and pull back out again, they're speaking English, because it implies to you that, okay, now even though what you're hearing is English, they're really speaking
and
German,
like
and they're doing kind of like an RP accent.
Well, I know, but especially, and we've seen plenty of plays like we reviewed Indecent at one point, and like that kind of did a similar convention. But I don't know, maybe my feathers are just a little ruffled by the way that the phrasing or implies it, but it also, I think, by needing the precision of speech and vocalization to both do the put-on accent for when the characters are speaking English versus the non-accented sounding standardly Canadian version for when they are speaking in Bengali.
I guess for me, logically it makes sense, because if English is your second language, there is an accent.
I'm not saying that it should be.
But then in the Canadian, the non-accented Canadian thing is meant to be like the fluency of it.
I understand what it's saying. I'm also just partly, I'm thinking practically that this inhibits certain South Asian performers from even being in a play like this, because if you naturally have that accent, you cannot, unless you can master the Canadian default accent, to switch back and forth. But it's kind of also like, a barrier to entry for South Asian actors who would be probably very happy to have a role in this play, but only if you speak with the fluently hegemonic Canadian accent. Right. Because that is the default that we'll use to represent your native tongue, presumably. Right. And like, I get why it's there, and I think it's a useful convention for silly white folks like us to understand when they're switching back and forth and what's being said. Part of me would almost love, and I recognize that I personally wouldn't be able to understand it, but I would love to see a production of this play for a Bengali audience that just has speech in Bengali and switches back to heavily accented English for the parts when they are speaking English. And that's clearly
I had a similar thought where I was like, you could project what they're saying on the brick.
Yeah, and maybe that would be the solution that doesn't prevent non-Bengali speakers like me from understanding what's being said. And I would gladly read this whole play off the wall and then just be like, oh, I heard an English thing. Yeah, I don't know if this is really a fair judgment to make, but it is something that I thought about.
Fair.
Okay.
Fair.
Back to our final couple, Kasim and Musa.
Yes. I mean, my biggest thing is, once again, it ties back to all the couples, is just the abrupt ending of this play where the divorce is granted and then blackout, and then there was a pause for the applause to start, because I think a lot of people were like, what's the next scene? Like it didn't feel like a conclusional thing. Like it felt we were missing a third act of this piece where it's like you see Nusa out on her own. You know, maybe Kasim and Abby do get back together again. Who knows?
I
just felt like there were so many things that were, I don't want to say introduced at the end, but like new concepts, new avenues were introduced at the end where it didn't feel quite like a let's wrap up the story. It felt like let's open the world further and let's go more into these, like more into these couplings.
Yeah.
And see what's next for all of them, because each couple kind of left in a spot of where are they going next? You know?
Yeah.
Let's Cece to go out on the road and do the dance training. Let's see what happens with Sachin and Nusa. Do they get together? Who knows? You know? Like it seems very up in the air with them already. So it's like one of those things of just wanting more. Like once again, these characters were also fascinating to me that I was like, I'll happily sit for another hour if you want to give me another hour of content to properly give them a proper conclusion of some kind. It just felt like such a abrupt spot to end the story at compared to, you know, finding a proper conclusion elsewhere. Like I don't know what the proper conclusion would be, but it felt like, yes, it concluded one part of the marriage that was causing the most problems is dissolved. But at the same time, it opened up a whole new door of what's next for them, you know? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are. I think this goes back to the two things that I sort of commented at the beginning of this, is that, first of all, it feels more like a novel than a play, and novels do have that just feeling of, oh, we've spent all this time with these characters. Who knows when it could end? It feels like life where, you know, if a novel doesn't end with the character dying, you always do wonder, could this just keep going and going and going, and isn't always satisfying the way that plays usually should end more satisfying, or we expect them to end with more of a note of satisfaction. So that, yeah, I agree with you that the ending feels abrupt, but of course more could happen with these characters, but how long do we want to keep sitting in this theater and seeing more and more? If it was a TV miniseries like you've proposed, then yeah, keep making more episodes and we'll see where their lives go. But for the sake of a play, the dissolution of their marriage feels like an appropriate place to end, because that's been driving the conflict, and now we have the resolution to that. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is what you're describing is the same problem that I had with Happy Place, is that, you know, we are spending time with these characters and a lot's going on, but if you're not going to do the big, you know, tragic end to the story that we would expect from a play, where does or should it end? And maybe there's no good answer to that, because life goes on. And that's what that ending, by not ending with death, very clearly indicates. And here we have a similar, yes, so much more could happen to these characters, and it's just up for you to imagine it. So I think I agree that the ending does feel abrupt, but I would be hard-pressed to think of a solution to it, and I kind of think I'm okay with where we leave off these characters, and, you know, imagine for yourself what might become of them.
Right.
Now, I guess the big thing that I would maybe say about Kasim in particular, because we had this conversation of are we supposed to like him? Again, two thoughts. First one is he is the photo negative of Sachin, who I started the play loving and then started to hate as it went on. Right. I did not like Kasim at the beginning, and then by the end, I'm like, okay, he's making an effort. He's doing it. I'm starting to be endeared to him. Yeah. So I'm just like, I do kind of think that as they almost not quite swap wives, but have a bit of, you know, as their marriages become more embroiled with each other, it's interesting how those two characters really do switch positions, both in terms of plot and morality. So that I thought that was interesting and just made me like Kasim a lot more as it went on.
That's fair.
Yeah, Mirabella, of course, as Nusa, I thought she was just, like, I liked her from the beginning. I thought she was really great. I did like how she became, you know, took charge of her own life, both romantically and getting a job and exploring the city. And I did love the line about, like, there's only so long you can explore the city for. I'm like, yes, especially if that city is Winnipeg.
Yeah.
There's really, you know, there's only so long it'll take you before you've seen the whole place.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mirabella was very, very charming and endearing in this role, and I was easily able to latch onto her character. But I guess using this couple as this kind of endpoint, I felt like a lot of the problems in this play became bigger deals than they had to be, just by virtue of the fact that the characters, mostly Kasim, but all of the characters in general, just don't communicate well with each other. Or just like
I agree with that.
The fact that Kasim has known for 3 months that he's already married, and didn't tell Abby until the moment that, oh, my wife is coming tomorrow, so now I guess I have to tell you. Like, they could have talked about this earlier and figured out, it still could have meant the end of their relationship, but like, it would have been less, absurdly heartbreaking.
Right.
And then, I think that there was a few other moments throughout the play where I was just like, oh yeah, if the characters just spoke to each other about what's on their mind. The other big one is when Nuza finds in his address book the name Lover with Abby's phone number. And it's like, oh, it all makes sense now. Like, she knows, but she knows, she already knows that he's not in love with her, that it was an arranged marriage, that he doesn't want anything to do with her physically, or even like interpersonally. So he could have just told her that, sorry, I was in love with someone else. I am legally committed to you, and I'm going to try to make this work. But again, for what little like capital C conflict we had in this play, the ones we had were a little capital C contrived, in my opinion. Right. So I don't know. Those are I feel like I'm such a negative Nelly in this one. I try to be enthusiastic. Overall, I did enjoy the play, and I enjoyed spending time with these characters, but this play, in its stringiness, kind of gave me a hard time finding the wheat among all the chaff, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, look at you.
No, metaphors.
Metaphors.
Cliched metaphors.
Ooh.
I was struggling to think of something more profound, so that's what we ended up with. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I think I've said it all. I mean, I highly recommend everybody go check it out. I mean, we did it a matinee in the afternoon, and it was very enjoyable. I mean, once again, it makes you want more, which I think is not a bad thing for a piece to do, is make me want to sit more and invest in these characters more in their lives. I'd be very happy with the miniseries too. If that was announced next week, I'd be like, tune me in, I'm watching.
Yeah, agreed. So, couldn't disagree with that, even if I tried. But I think for all of my misgivings, this is a very strong play, very well written, very well acted. The designs are all amazing. I would encourage anybody to check it out and let us know what you thought of it. Get down in the comments and agree, disagree. Like, we encourage the continuation of this discourse. And, if I happen to wake up at 3 a.m. later in the week and be like, oh, I was wrong about everything, it all makes sense, then I will gladly eat crow on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Other than that, Ryan, I'm happy to sign off on this one. Stay tuned for 2 more.
Yes, we have. This has been going to be a busy week. They'll come out in a couple weeks of these episodes. But yes, once again, New is playing at the Berkeley Street Theatre. It's Necessary Angel Theatre in association with Canadian Stage and the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. It is running until May 14th. We will have the link for the tickets in the description below. Check it out if you would like to, if you've made it this far with us and want to see for yourself what all this discussion is about.
And if you have a play you'd like us to come talk about, feel free to send us an email. We're always happy to come on out and see these new works, because we are avid theater enthusiasts who just love to have conversations. And if your cast wants to come talk to us, we're happy to do that as well. So if you're a theater company anywhere in the world, Ryan's done interviews with people from New York and all over. So, we are welcome. We are welcome. This is what we do. So yes, please bring on the discussions. Ron and I and Jill are all happy to have these very fun discussions about these new works. So bravo to this team, and we cannot wait for the next.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So Mac, before we sign off, where can people find and follow you and all your antics outside of Cup of Hemlock?
Well, you can follow me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms. You can follow my other musical theater antics over at Before the Downbeat Musical podcast. Ron and I have a bit of a project on the go right now that you'll have to tune in and find out what it's all about. We're currently wrapping up my reviews of the Apple TV show Schmigadoon season 2, which is all about the realm of Schmicago. So there's lots of great 70s era musical fun in there. So if you like that style of Chicago, Pippin, Godspell, Hair, Company, all that good stuff, then come on over, check it out, all that type of fun stuff there. But yeah, Ryan, give us your classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off we all know and love.
Yeah, no point trying to follow me personally on social media. Maybe you'll hear me on Before the Downbeat, Mac's other podcast coming up soon. But otherwise, all of my theater antics tend to live here, Cup of Hemlock. So if you like me, like my opinions for some reason, you can follow us here at Cup of Hemlock or at COH Theater on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can follow us if you're watching this on YouTube, here on YouTube. Click subscribe. We are Cup of Hemlock Theater. If you're listening to this as a podcast, it's Cup of Hemlock Theater Podcast, and do the podcast things to that. Oh, my classic sign off. All right, thanks for joining us. We have more episodes, more reviews coming up soon, so hope you join us back for those. In the meantime, cheers.
Cheers. My cup has runneth dry, Ryan.
Oh, well.
'Tis the end for now.
Stay
tuned for more, though. All right.